Hello and welcome into the latest edition of Catching Up with Clutch Sports Media. And today we welcome on a good friend of the program, as we say, Pablo Iglesias, former WEEK weekend sports anchor and reporter. Pablo, thanks for joining us, especially during this busy time for you in your personal and professional career. How have you been?
Guys, I'm doing phenomenal. I think we can all definitely agree that it is nice to recognize that 2020 is very much behind us at this point. Yes, we still have some things, as we were just talking about before we hit the record button, that 2021 is going to have some hurdles and challenges, but I'm sure we will not see a year like 2020 as we start to move forward, or at least we can hope so. Other than that, doing well. As you mentioned, former WEEK sports anchor. It's a little bittersweet to move past Peoria. But once we start churning throughout the new year, I'm really excited to start sharing some news with you guys. But in due time for sure.
It's kind of an arbitrary thing, flipping the calendar, but this year it's something that's going to mean a lot to a lot of people. And for you, it represents some new frontiers. Now, of course, I understand you're not quite ready to unveil where you're going, but that's got to be exciting, right? Just moving to a new chapter. And I know that you've got fond memories of your time in Peoria, having gone to Bradley, and being from the Chicago area. But it's got to be exciting to move on to that new chapter.
Absolutely. You know what, guys, especially how the past year had gone. I think it's really interesting to see what a lot of people have learned from the challenges, the hurdles that we went through in 2020. And one of the big things that I felt like that really challenged me and kind of grew in a way is my patience to recognize that you're still taking the right steps, you're doing the right things, whether it was in that current situation or even just in life in general. Make sure that you're still doing the right things. And just because what you might not see exactly what you want, even though you're taking the right steps, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. You want to make sure that you remain patient, that you take the right steps, that you still be a good person, be kind, be respectful, all those types of things, guys. And going back to what I was saying, patience is the big thing that I've learned, especially during this process, but very exciting. As I mentioned, though, too, it is still bittersweet because working in Peoria, living in Peoria for 6 out of the last 7 years of my life, went to Bradley, and I know you guys are proud Bradley Braves as well. Um, you start to recognize the amount of growth that you have in a certain place, and that's the other thing. You don't want to forget where you came from and what you've learned from past things, and the amount of people that I got to meet, the stories that I got to tell in sports and in news too during the pandemic. It really gave me a good chance to grow as a storyteller, but even more importantly, gave me a chance to meet some phenomenal people in the Central Illinois area.
Yeah, Pablo, we're certainly grateful to have met you because I know that you've been a supporter of Clutch Sports Media from day one. I think you're maybe our first retweet other than Joey and I. So we certainly appreciate that kindness. And looking at this past year as a whole, it's certainly thrown a lot of challenges at people who work in television, especially sports anchors, because you've moved outside of sports because there haven't been a lot of sports to cover. What has your job been like during the pandemic?
During the pandemic, it just changed in a number of ways. When sports, we talk about March 15th, 2020, especially for sports fans. I think that's a big date. Well, March 15th, I will say, is my mother's birthday, but that's beside the point there. March 15th, 2020, a time when the sports world was put on hold, and that was a big thing. And we were almost kind of wondering what was going to happen. It was almost a day by day thing. Yes, no sports became the story, and we ran with that, but you could only run with that for so long. And from there, what my job in the newsroom was, it kind of changed again on a day by day basis. For the most part, I was usually a video editor. Sometimes I was a photographer. I believe at one point, I will tell you guys, late March, early April, we had to carry around a letter from Homeland Security to say, in case I was not put in this situation, but in case law enforcement, state officials, the National Guard, I'm not kidding, came by to tell us, what are you doing here? We had to show them that letter to say that we're an essential employee. We have to be out and about doing our jobs. It was such a crazy time at the beginning too. But that transition slowly, I want to say roughly late August into September. Sports were starting to come back a little bit professional, so we were still doing our highlights. We were starting to do some stories, but unfortunately, with the way things have kind of gone in this state, they put a little bit of a halt to high school sports. We still got a chance to see some things, but it wasn't to the full extent. So in that regard, I ended up transitioning into a news role, and we did get the opportunity actually to go back into the summer to talk about some things about civil unrest when Bradley put the march together. Also, some of our great colleagues at WEK got to talk about the Illinois state rallies. Those are some big times to be a part of, and to get to talk to people about what's going on and how professional athletes use their platform, and how it trickled down to college and even some high school athletes to use that as their platform. So sports still happened, but going now into like the news side of it, just a bunch of different stories about how the community has rallied together during a pandemic. For instance, one of my favorites was going to the Southside Mission, which is a local Peoria staple that's been around, and how they utilized the limited amount of volunteers that they had to put together Thanksgiving meals. And it was really interesting to get to see that, because they always do this delivery service. They always have thousands of people come through the doors, but this year they couldn't. So they tried to figure that out. And again, with all these stories talking about versatility, talking about being there when the first round of COVID-19 vaccines were going to be distributed to Central Illinois and were on their way to the OSF hospital, I had to take a step back and think, whoa, I just said that. I just said this on camera. And you know, you don't think about it until you take that step back, when you realize that history is right there. And to quote one of my favorite musicals, Hamilton, of course, history does have its eyes on you. But no, but in all seriousness, though, it is very interesting to go back and think, wow, you know, you get to see a whole lot in this industry, and you want to take a step back, take a deep breath, and realize, man, a lot of crazy things are happening around you.
I always like to say that we are living in a chapter of a history book. You know, when our kids are in A push down the line, however long that is, you know, they'll be reading about this year. But you raise a good point that the stories that were told, you know, there was no shortage of stories to tell, and a lot of what we got to talk about was very compelling, but not at all what we thought we were going to be talking about in February. So I want to get you to elaborate on that just a little bit. You know, what's it like maybe when you realize that the stories you're telling have that gravity and that they are important and will be important in the context of history?
It is interesting, going back and thinking about that. So, for instance, when I want to say when high school football was announced that they were not going to be having a season in the fall, we actually decided to go out to Deer Creek, Mackinac, small town of just about a little over 1,000 people, and just talking about being there for what was supposed to be week one kickoff. Very exciting season. First year head coach in Cody Myers, great guy who formerly coached at Canton, now at DMAC, a good friend of mine as well. And we got to just talking about, hey, you know what is it like that we're not kicking off the season? But it's going beyond what the story is on the field. Of course, you still want to talk to the kids, because yes, high school football is about the student athletes. It's about the coaches. It's about what happens out there. But we wanted to try something a little different and talk about what does it mean for the community? Again, especially in an area that is about a little over 1,000 population. You know, what does high school football mean? And, you know, as you guys are very well aware, being in Central Illinois kind of gives you that Friday Night Lights atmosphere. It's very cool to be over there. And it was great because we went to a restaurant that usually streams all the DMAC games. They have a full bar, but of course with, you know, the coronavirus, they couldn't do that this year. They couldn't do that. They couldn't have games. Their business was hurting. Same thing for the man that we met who was a super fan. He had all the gear going back, I want to say, to like the 80s, maybe even like close to like late 70s. Like the guy had everything, brought it all out, had a state championship ring. He works in the press box. So kind of going back to all that, yes, it is cool to tell the stories of like what happened in the game, who was the key player. But in this industry too, guys, it's always about telling the story, who's behind the story, the people that make the game outside of the game, if that makes sense. Because that's the big thing. And that's such the cool thing. And it's nice that sports are starting to come back, but once it's at full force, that's such a unifying tool. You know, I always tell my dad, I am so excited to know, or to just see into the future. What is a sporting event when we're at full capacity? What's the Super Bowl? What's the college football playoff? even though they might have a good amount of fans. You guys get what I'm saying, though. Once fans can really start to come back, and even at a high school football game, um, what's that environment going to feel like? We're going to get those chills, and to think like, wow, the national anthem's playing or whatever it is, starting lineups, and we're like, wow, you can hear the cheers. You're not hearing the filtered fake sound, I guess, to try to make the players feel like that. But you guys get what I'm saying just getting fans back, and it's going to be interesting once that happens.
Yeah, you mentioned DMAC, and I think that's a great example. Me and Joey stopped there week 2 of our football tour in fall 2019. And it's a great example of a town that just loves its high school sports. And Central Illinois, you mentioned, it's that Friday Night Lights atmosphere. Everybody loves prep sports. And so that makes your position all the more exciting. Now, let's take a little bit of a turn here. You've covered a lot of high school teams and a lot of high school athletes. Who or what sticks out as some of your favorites?
It's again, I wouldn't necessarily say that there's specific teams or players per se, but I think just being there for different moments, just being there for the exciting times of Friday Night Lights, just picking out some random things. Like I remember the first weekend that I was doing full out sports coverage. I went to state cross country at Detweiler Park. That was exciting. It was also, I'm just trying to figure out the course because I'm like, whoa, what's going on over here? It's huge. There's a lot of people here. Where do I park? I swear, I think it took me at least 30 minutes to go, maybe a couple miles, not even with that huge parking lot. And then I went to Washington over at Babcock Field, and that was actually right around the 5-year. Yes, that marked the 5-year anniversary following the Washington tornado, and they were playing Sacred Heart Griffin Springfield at that game, and just being there for that energy and just getting to see what Central Illinois football was all about. That slowly trickled down, and I started to, enjoy every game that I went to. For instance, just thinking about the high octane offense of Peoria High, they put up some scores that look like basketball games. I'm not kidding. They are a run and gun. We went to cover them in, I think it was Richards High School, which is a Chicago suburb. I think was either the first or second play. They busted out a 75-yard touchdown. That was in the second play of the game. Unfortunately, they ended up losing that one, but still, you think about those types of teams. Basketball, Peoria, Notre Dame, when they were running, but Roanoke Benson too. I will say they were a fun team to watch as well. And the other thing too is the tournaments. High school football is always a big thing. Again, another game that I loved being at was Fieldcrest in Eureka, when Fieldcrest was still undefeated going into when they lost all the way to the 2A semifinal, I believe, in football. But high school basketball, that is just another breed, and a lot of people sleep on high school basketball in Central Illinois. You got the Tournament of Champions after Thanksgiving. You've got the State Farm Holiday Tournament, Peak and Holiday as well. There's a lot of talent that comes through, and unfortunately, after the news of the IHSA going back and forth with it, March Madness was just as exciting at the Civic Center, but just a whole mess of things. And also, getting to see EJ Liddell when he was here last March. He's a stud, and that's just a lot of different things that come through here, a lot of different memories. I'm just trying to think what else, honestly, but it's just like I can't pinpoint, but it's just the environments. I guess it's always, when people see when they saw the 25 News car pull up, they always know that, like, okay, it's prime time. I gotta put on my best game. So it's exciting that, when people are there, they know what's up, and you just go out there, have fun, and bring it on air, and just go from there.
There's a lot in what you just said that I'd like to respond to. Just a couple select things. It is a shame that Peoria is not going to get one more go around with the state tournament, because it's and being from Champaign, I'm happy to see it come to the State Farm Center, but it was a lot of fun at the Civic Center. Wish we could have gotten out there for it in 2020. But I wanted to ask you, when was kind of your first experience with high school sports in the area? Of course, you went to Bradley and you were kind of around it, but there's a little bit of a Bradley bubble. Not everyone gets out and experiences it. I know that it wasn't until Larry and I started Clutch Sports Media that I actually went out to the games. As we mentioned, DMAC in week 2, Farmington week 1, our football schedule, that you really realize, like, this is really, this is the atmosphere, this is what it's all about. So when was kind of your first experience with high school sports in Peoria?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Joey, there is a little bit of a Bradley bubble. I didn't even get to really experience high school basketball outside of that. It was just all Bradley basketball, and as you guys know too, I went to Bradley from 2013 to 2017. So not the best years for Bradley basketball. So even that exposure was slightly limited. But going back to that, really, I think it kind of started when I worked in Peoria, came back and started to dabble in a little bit more. I think the biggest thing was to quote Cody Myers again when we were just talking when I did that story back in August, was talking about my high school, Mount Carmel, over in the south side of Chicago, and just lightly saying, hey, we've solid football high school, and he's like, come on, man, everybody knows your high school, and I just thought that kind of put me back a little bit. I'm like, man, I think just in general, though, when it comes to the deep roots of what high school football means to Illinois, especially Central Illinois, I got that taste from the get-go when I got here. And then because I started October of 2018, so I was on a little bit of the closer end to playoff time, but getting there, I think for first time in full fall, that was insane. Just seeing what kickoff was like. I'm trying to think. I apologize. I got to think of, and if knowing how things work, it's going to randomly come to me. But I'm trying to think of like just the most explosive place, or just like just any atmosphere you could think of. Actually, here's one: was when Pekin, they started out the season 0-3, all of a sudden resurrected, and they just turned it around. You guys know exactly which season I'm talking about. I unfortunately cannot remember his last name, but his name was Sebastian. He was a jack of all trades. He was the quarterback, he was a running back, a wide receiver. I swear, the man, if he was on a fantasy high school football team, he would be giving you points on points. But I remember being at one game. It actually was the Washington game. They ended up upsetting them. Pekin was just, going absolutely nuts. The kid went off for a crazy game, and you felt that fire there. You felt something that was coming back. But that's just one game in particular that I could think of right now.
And so many great experiences like that. And I know me and Joey have had moments like that when we're covering Clutch Sports Media, whether it was football or basketball, where we really realize how much people care. You mentioned Mount Carmel, and I want to go back to that because I think a few months back you posted a clip of you doing play-by-play when you were a junior at Mount Carmel. And I got to say, I really enjoyed the clip. We'll show it right here.
Strong winds right now. Let's see if Ivan waits for it to calm down. No, he's going to kick with the wind. And this one is booted. Looks like it's going to be returned, though. And it's fumbled again! And it's picked up by Sanchez! Sanchez into the end zone! Touchdown, Caravan!
I got my broadcasting start at Belvedere High School. Joey got a fantastic broadcasting start at Urbana High School. How much did it mean to you to get a really good start in broadcasting at Mount Carmel?
It really proved to be the difference maker. I knew that this was a passion that I've had since I was a 10-year-old kid going into sports broadcasting, and I knew that Mount Carmel had this, at the time, very unique broadcasting program where they did the live stream. And I'll tell you guys, we were streaming too, I want to say, to roughly at least 3,000 viewers a game. I think our peak hit 9,000. I was a junior, senior in high school. That clip was during their state title run in 2012, so my senior year, I believe. And it was actually crazy too. We had a folding table, we had our soundboard, we had 2 headsets, our computer, all that. So we had a little bit of a crew with our camera, but we were right smack dab in the stand. So that's why we had to blast the volume. And you could even hear, if you listen, there's a little bit of an Easter egg. My dad likes to point this out. So somebody was actually telling me specifically, so the fumble ended up being brought back. They had to, because you can't advance a fumble on a kickoff, so the ball is automatically dead, but you can still recover it as the kicking team, but you just can't advance it. So in that clip, you might be able to hear somebody says something to me. But as you can see, the energy was always there, and it's just fun to look back at those types of memories. The cool thing too is I actually posted a the how it started, how it's going type of trend, and one picture that came back was when we did our own version of College Game Day against our rival St. Rita. That was my senior year. We were 0-3. We ended up winning. Spoiler alert, but we we did this crazy setup, and awesome shout out to the moderator who I still keep in tabs with as well. He's doing different things, but doing some great things. At the time, our moderator came up with this awesome idea to have this scaffolding set up, do some interviews, do a little bit of sports science in between. I think it was like a sports science skit of the science behind a punt and how to punt into the wind. But anyway, going back to that, it was just all about creativity. It was having fun. And I think that's just what brought out my passion even more, was knowing that, being a part of a program like Mount Carmel in a different way, to watch your friends win a state championship in football, to be there to document it again in a unique way. But going back to all about it, it's all about storytelling. It's about having fun, and that's the beauty of this industry. We might still, it might be our jobs, but at the end of the day, our jobs are to be out there to be talking about these games, to be talking about these phenomenal achievements. So going back to your question, Larry, I definitely felt that it helped propel me. And the other thing too is that for any high school students that are listening out there, just because your high school doesn't have a program like this doesn't mean that can't happen. You can definitely start up something like this. And honestly, as always, I've commended you guys both for doing something like this too, because it's all about creating opportunities. You can make content, you can keep pushing it out there. There's so many different routes that you can go. So just because it's not happening now doesn't mean you can't do something about it. You can get a phone, you can get a camera, you can start a podcast. There's so many different ways that you can get content out there. So if you're sitting around thinking, what can I do? You absolutely can do something. So just got to be a go-getter and keep doing your thing.
Certainly appreciate the kind words there, Pablo. And that really is great advice. And I would say the same thing. Get involved and do as much as you can and be as dynamic as possible. And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you next. At what point in your journey, of course, it started in high school, went through Bradley, now has gone through WEK and is on to the next chapter. When did you kind of realize that you wanted to take the path that you're on? Because I know, for example, a lot of guys will go into college, they want to do play-by-play, and then they'll go through the process, they go into writing. They kind of they change what they thought they were going to do and just go into a different part of the industry. So when did you kind of realize that you were going to take the path that you've gone on and has yielded success thus far?
Honestly, again, really just from that 10-year-old kid passion has always been my dream for broadcasting. It just, over time, I started to realize more and more through different networks, through organizations. For instance, I'm heavily involved with the Asian American Journalists Association. They've been a wonderful network. And not even just that, but the amount of people that I've gotten to know and grow, they're almost like create that second family atmosphere for you. It's that type of a supportive group. So going back to all of that, I had always known that broadcast was something that I loved to do. It was just a matter of meeting more people, learning more about the industry, and figuring out, okay, this is where I need to go. And I'll tell you, I'm very fortunate to have had the first market start in Peoria. But at the same point, as I was starting to apply for jobs to get into broadcast, I would have been willing to go anywhere. I would have gone to North Dakota. I would have gone to a lot of different places. So it's not just about versatility and skills, but, figuring out, being transparent and going anywhere, wherever that right opportunity is. And it's all about, just because you're not covering this team right off the bat, or you might be in a city that you may have never heard of, don't write that off necessarily. Don't feel like that, hey, I've never heard of this place, so why should I give it a shot? Give it a shot, because it's all about what you make, or sorry, let me rephrase that. It's what you make most out of the opportunity that you have in front of you. A great quote that I heard right before I entered the industry. I was at an NBC Universal workshop, and I believe at the time she might have changed positions, but I believe she is still there for MSNBC. She was a VP. She specifically said, her name was Yvette, and said, don't wait to be a home run hitter in your next market or your dream market. Be a home run hitter now. Be that home run hitter now. And that's what I want to pass on to you guys. That's what I want to pass on to the listeners, is that make the most out of the opportunity that you have in front of you, because again, you absolutely can do that. So again, Joey, going back to your question, I always knew that broadcast was something that I wanted to do. It was all just about associating myself with different groups, meeting the right people to help navigate me through that path, to help teach me, okay, this is the type of things that you want in your reel. Move this up a little higher. Those small things. And once you start to recognize those small little steps, that's going to start building you up a little bit. And for me, another great mentor of mine at Mount Carmel always said to me too, you always want to challenge yourself to not always move laterally, but to try to move vertically. What are you doing to challenge yourself each and every day to make sure that you're progressing? And again, progress is very different. As I mentioned earlier, just as you're doing the right things and you're not seeing that in front of you, that doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. Some things take a little more times than other, but all about repetition, all about doing, all about getting those reps in, as I was mentioning, taking progress, taking those steps, and figuring out how can you challenge yourself.
No, and something I always like to say is success is not quite a linear equation. It's always bumps in the road. And I think, yeah, that's certainly great points. And I say that your path has yielded success thus far, certainly will continue to yield success in your next endeavor. I want to close with a fun question, and it ties back into when you joined us the night that high school sports were postponed and ultimately canceled in March, the Clutch Sports Media Special, whatever we called it. I asked you, I said, one thing that Larry and I are thinking about doing when sports resume is we're thinking about starting a standings board and getting, we'll see Kurt Pegler at a game. We'll give him a point in the standings. We'll see Jim Madsen, Pablo Iglesias, whatever. We see them, they get a point, and whoever we cross paths with the most at the end of the season theoretically wins the title. Now that you're no longer in the area, WEK, you're out of the picture now. Can you maybe make a prediction for who we see the most and who wins, whatever we wind up calling it? I don't know. I don't have a name for it, but I want to get Pablo Iglesias' prediction on this.
A prediction. I know that I'll tell you that Jim just goes absolutely everywhere. The way that highlights left and right, especially, I'll tell you, on a Football Friday, there are at least 3 blocks designated for high school football, and we do have a great team that just goes all about everywhere. But I will say you might see the title coming over there. Kurt is just right behind there too. So I can't say who exactly is going to take that title. I'm going to tell you it might be a little close. Might be a little Jim, but Kurt again is right there. So I'll keep it at that one.
Man, Pablo kind of going with the homer pick there, the home team, I guess. Well, Pablo, I think that just about wraps it up. We appreciate you taking the time today and really taking the time always when you've been in Peoria to help us out and help up-and-coming broadcasters out, whether it's at Bradley or outside of Bradley. Really means a lot.
Thank you guys again so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Like I said, it's bittersweet to move on from the River City, but as I'm sure you guys very much know, this is a place that you guys are growing and you guys get to recognize so many different things, and outside of Peoria as well. It truly was a joy to get to meet so many wonderful people in Central Illinois, get to tell some stories and be a part of some terrific moments, high school, college, and even some professional as well. But thank you guys for the time. Wish you nothing but the absolute best. I know you guys are going to be doing some great things as Clutch Sports Media continues to grow. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you, Pablo. Appreciate it. Best of luck in your next steps. And for everybody watching, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you next time for the next episode, Catching Up Clutch Sports Media.